been an ugly start to the year for software stocks. Feels like we're in this kind of existential crisis. And the question that's increasingly being asked is, why does anyone need a software provider when their own engineers can spin up their own tools using something like Claude Code?
I guess Microsoft just doesn't really like consent in this situation because they really are just forcing themselves onto the average user.
Instead of improving what worked, Microsoft tried to reinvent the wheel and made a square one instead. They threw out the start menu, plastered the screen with tiles, and built an interface that made no sense on a desktop.
Bill Gates is in full-blown panic as millions of enraged users are violently fleeing Windows for Linux in 2026. Windows 11 has pushed people to the edge with relentless updates, spyware, and ads, and the backlash is brutal. The tech empire he built is cracking, and Linux is ruthlessly devouring its users. For years, Windows dominated desktops. It was the unquestioned standard. But lately, frustrations are boiling over. People are fed up with forced updates that interrupt work, constant pop-ups pushing cloud services, full-screen ads in places you never asked for them, and CoPilot interruptions that feel more like spying than helping. Every little annoyance adds up, and users are starting to ask themselves a simple question. If Windows keeps punishing me for using it, why not try something else?
And with the end of support last month of Windows 10, many have considered leaving Windows altogether. And the reason for this is because a lot of perfectly working good Windows 10 devices whose hardware runs Windows 10 perfectly cannot upgrade to Windows 11 due to the strict hardware requirements by Microsoft.
Windows 11 in particular has become a lightning rod for these frustrations. Compared to Windows 10, it feels heavier, slower, and more intrusive. The Start menu now comes packed with ads. File Explorer tries to sell you cloud storage, and the Settings menu isn't exempt either.
I think there's going to be a pretty wide separation or gulf between the kinds of apps that you build internally, very quickly for an internal, workflow, or obviously the software you're building for your customers, and the core systems of record that you use to power your operations and your just the core way that you run your business.
For people with sensitive setups like OLED monitors, taskbar auto-hiding failures can literally damage their screens if left unchecked. Enterprises aren't happy either. Companies are reporting performance drops, security headaches, and soaring licensing costs. Employees share stories of computers that used to work fine, suddenly grinding to a halt after updates. And these stories spread fast online, creating a snowball of discontent.
In early 2025, reports suggested that Microsoft quietly dialed back internal growth expectations for some of its AI products. That's because customers have pushed back against these agentic AI add-ons.
Then came the unexpected hero, the Steam Deck. Valve's Linux-based handheld gaming PC started quietly in 2022, selling 3.8 million units by the end of 2023 and over 6 million by mid-2025. Gamers discovered something shocking. Linux wasn't just good enough for gaming. It often outperformed Windows.
Core backbones of how companies operate, and maybe some companies will play around with the idea of could you compress that stack by building that out yourself, but at the end of the day, most companies want to be focused on their core competency, and usually that's not rebuilding kind of IT systems that they can get off.
Thanks to Proton compatibility, 70 to 80% of Windows games ran flawlessly. Benchmarks went viral. Counter-Strike 2, for example, hit 340 frames per second on Linux, compared to 285 on Windows 11. That's a 19% boost on the same hardware. Gamers noticed. Steam's hardware survey confirmed it. Linux users went from 1.4% in January 2023 to 9.3% by December 2025. Suddenly, Linux wasn't a niche experiment. It was a viable alternative. If it could run demanding games better than Windows, why not the rest of their desktop work? Gamers started experimenting, installing Ubuntu, Pop, OS, Linux Mint, and sharing results online.
And of course, Reddit did not take too kindly to this whole idea of agentic OS. Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think Reddit takes kindly to pretty much anything.
What really accelerated the shift, though, was YouTube. Just a few years ago, moving to Linux meant diving into command lines, troubleshooting drivers, and risking hours of frustration. That barrier kept mainstream users firmly on Windows.
So, having an agent try and, predict what information a user should have access to and then occasionally give them the wrong data that they shouldn't have access to is obviously a non-starter for any mission critical workflow or process. So I think you're always going to have this separation of the system of record that stores the data, that contains the workflow around that data.
Today, viral tutorials have demolished that wall. Videos with over 11 million views walk beginners through every step, from choosing a distribution to installing apps and setting up workflows. Entire playlists document professional creative work on Linux, demonstrating that DaVinci Resolve, Blender, and Krita run smoothly. Across all these videos, the cumulative viewership exceeds 50 million.
Using the mobile version of what used to be Office, now stupidly called Microsoft 360 CoPilot, leads you straight to a CoPilot prompt. Like, I don't want the fucking chat with your AI bot. I want to see a list of my recent documents.
Comments from real users confirm it. Switching isn't scary, it's doable, and in many cases it's faster and cleaner than Windows. Communities on Reddit and Discord provide instant support, answering questions in minutes rather than hours like traditional Windows support.
AI agents and AI generally is one of the biggest boons for enterprise software because if you imagine a world where there's 10 or 100 times more AI agents that are using technology in the future because they can run around and use our tools, then actually the platforms where those agents are operating in and the data that they have access to.
The psychological effect is huge. What used to feel like a technical leap into the unknown now feels like a simple, empowering choice. Gamers, creators, and even some office workers are realizing that Linux is often better. No ads, no forced updates, no spyware, just a system that works. And every person who switches reinforces the perception that leaving Windows isn't risky, it's smart.
This is the Microsoft File Explorer. Well, a bunch of eagle-eyed people decided to look through all the updates that Microsoft pushes, and they found out that we're stuffing the AI right into your file browser.
Windows 11 created the perfect storm. Its missteps pushed users towards something free, efficient, and user-respecting. Steam Deck proved performance, YouTube proved accessibility, and online communities proved support. Together, these forces have turned curiosity into action, and action into a growing wave of Linux adoption.
All the things that have been done to move away from Microsoft, why it matters, but also why it could still very much completely fail and result in a whole big pile of nothing.
Just when you thought Linux was only for hobbyists tinkering in basements, it's quietly shaking up the corporate world. The big surprise? Companies are actually ditching Windows because Windows 11 is, let's just say, less than lovable. Enterprises aren't supposed to switch operating systems overnight. It's expensive, disruptive, and usually a nightmare. But with Windows 11, staying put suddenly felt risky. Performance hiccups, security headaches, and hidden costs made it easier to consider alternatives than fight the system.
There seems to be a trend emerging from the European Union recently where they just basically are trying to get rid of everything that is not being made in the EU.
Munich, Germany, set off the shockwaves. The city moved 29,000 PCs from Windows to Linux, taking a route many thought impossible. They'd tried Windows, went back once after political pressure, and realized, nope, Windows 11 absolutely not. Barcelona followed with 12,000 machines. Paris rolled out Linux on 28,000 systems. Rome was testing on 18,000, and Amsterdam piloted 8,000. Even a telecom giant like Deutsche Telekom made the leap. Yes, 60,000 workstations switched, saving the company $89 million. That's right, nearly $90 million. Suddenly, Linux isn't just the underdog. It's a money-saving, stress-reducing powerhouse. Smash that like button and subscribe to stay ahead of every Windows update and tech shakeup.
Software, and this generally means Microsoft products, are being phased out by individual municipalities or federal states or organizations. This is not a new trend, but it's been really reinforced by the current geopolitical situation.
In the US, companies are more cautious, but tech giants are quietly leading the charge. Valve, Epic Games, they're all in on Linux internally. Some manufacturing firms are testing Linux in production environments, and the results are surprisingly smooth. The narrative is clear. Linux is stepping out of the shadows of hobbyist nerdom and claiming legitimacy in the corporate world.
Zorin OS is known in the Linux world, and also from my own experiences, as one of the best starting points that a new user that is switching over from Windows or just generally starting out can have. It comes with a traditional taskbar, a start menu that has slightly been reworked with this new release.
This generally means Microsoft products are being phased out by individual municipalities or federal states or organizations.
Now, let's hit the reality check. Despite all the hype about millions of people fleeing Windows, StatCounter's numbers are more modest. As of December 2025, Windows still commands 66.4% of the global desktop market. Linux sits at 3.86%, macOS at 4.75%, and Chrome OS at 1.24%. In the US, Linux reached about 5% by mid-2025. Surveys in the UK suggest only around 6% of Windows users are considering a switch. So, millions might be a stretch, but growth is happening, quietly and steadily, especially among gamers, tech enthusiasts, and enterprises. Viral perception exaggerates the trend, but the underlying shift is undeniable.
This adventure we're going into, where everything is going to be AI, is just going to have some of the more frustrating results of all time.
Force people to move to the latest OS or force them onto more costly support plans as well, which means staying on Microsoft solutions is getting more and more expensive when moving to open source, on paper, looks free because you don't have to pay any license.
Can't get around a specific software requirement? A virtual machine can handle it. And with web applications like Gmail, Google Docs, Slack, Zoom, and Salesforce, most business workflows now run perfectly on Linux. Creative professionals aren't left behind either. DaVinci Resolve, Blender, Krita, and Inkscape, the Linux equivalents, don't just match Windows tools. In some cases, they're better. Users are realizing that Linux isn't just an alternative, it's a superior choice for many tasks.
Instead of Microsoft Office, they're also ditching Microsoft Teams. Basically, they're trying to be Microsoft free entirely, or as much as can be.
All of these points point to a tipping point that Microsoft can't ignore. Analysts project Linux could hit 18-22% global market share by December 2026. Once that threshold hits, network effects kick in. Developers start supporting Linux more seriously, hardware manufacturers optimize for it, and the momentum accelerates. Windows dominance, once unquestionable, is starting to crumble in pockets where users find a better, faster, ad-free experience. Even if millions haven't jumped ship yet, the trajectory is clear. Linux is moving from niche to mainstream, and Microsoft can't put the genie back in the bottle. So, what's the real story behind the headlines? It's no longer a rumor. It's a trend with legs. The question isn't if Linux is viable anymore, it's how long it will take before you start seeing it on your own network, in your office, or even on your neighbor's PC. Are you ready to switch, or are you still clinging to the Windows bubble?